What is up, guys? Rekus here with a new video, and today with my second part of the final verdict on Mockman series, we are on the account of fellow community member Ritz, who thankfully gave me this account to test Swordsman Mockman in the early game. He built Mockman as a first Transcendence hero on this account and has a pretty insane copy with B- attack, B- HP and overall C+. He already has him at V4 and some good amount actually of homeowner buffs on him. You can see the attack a few seconds ago. And we are going to go and test him in Broken Spaces and in Realmsgate, and I'm going to tell you what I think about the idea of building him as a first Transcendence hero. First of all, we are in Broken Spaces 7, basically fighting the Aether and the Aspen, which is a little bit of a tough fight in that they reduce the heal effect on Mockman, so he can't really heal up again, which will make him die in round 14, I can spoiler that much. But beyond that, we are going to talk about his damage dealing capabilities. And his damage dealing capabilities are not that great in the boss fight, I have to say. We will see the comparison with Ritz's V3 Eloise in the front row. And I can spoiler that much even, they are pretty even in the end. And this is something that you really don't want to see with your first Transcendence, with your first homeowner Transcendence V4 hero and random V3. So that's a little bit of a problem. And the reason for this is a lot of the kit of Mockman is balanced around hitting like the entire back row, which are 4 enemies that you would usually deal damage to. And in this situation, you only really have 2 enemies that he can hit. And this proves to be difficult for him. And the other thing is, he just now switched his stance, but before that he was in his blue stance, in the star ascending stance, which is his defensive stance, and in that stance he basically does no damage. And cannot even do a lot of counterattacks because we just have 2 enemies, and this really makes it difficult for him to excel in boss situations like this, where heroes like SFX would have destroyed those bosses, or a Fairy Queen Vessel would have destroyed them as well. Here we see him dying now, and we will come to the damage screen quite soon, where we will see that Eloise is not really far behind Mockman, despite Mockman having homeowner buffs and being a Transcendence hero at V4. So really not worth playing him if you want to go for boss fights. Now we can see him in a situation where he can excel a bit more, which is Realmsgate. A big problem with him in Realmsgate is consistency. Like, we will fight Light team, the Light faction team a few times now. We will fight the Forest faction team a few times now. And I really want you to have a look at how different those fights work out. Like sometimes they take a long time. You could see that he one-shot Faithblade, by the way, in this fight. And the next fight is going to be absolutely short, and we are absolutely going to demolish those enemies. And the reason for this is basically, for one, crit RNG. And the other reason, of course, being his chases. If you've watched my 40-minute video I uploaded yesterday, the final verdict on Mockman part 1, you know that his chases play a big role in his active skill and the burst they can potentially inflict. And this, of course, plays a major role in fights like this as well. The last thing being the Omorph Rift debuff, the swords over the head of the enemies. And if those swords land on enemies that aren't really important, and you get your first active and kill those unimportant enemies, you might come into a situation where not a whole lot of enemies have those Omorph Rift debuff, and you can't really deal that much damage, while, for example, maybe a Garuda survived that can burst Mockman down. So that's not really that great. On the other hand, you can see the best fights he sometimes has. And this is like where he gets those really important enemies and gets 4 or 5 chases going and kills those enemies on round 1, which can be absolutely great and absolutely demolishing for the enemy. But then again, I have to say, there are heroes that can do that better. Like if you have a Sun Devourer Eos, she will have the same effect on enemies like this, and will buff herself up with damage reduction if your weaker heroes in the team die. At this point, and a count like this, you still have heroes like the Wall deck we have in the slot 6 that die rather early and that you only basically have to get some buffs out, and those can easily buff your Sun Devourer Eos to get a little bit of damage reduction, or when the enemies die, a little bit of all damage dealt, and push through those enemies fairly easily while being absolutely tanky. Which is something Mockman really isn't. He isn't that tanky. He would need the sublimation for his basic skill basically to regenerate some life. But you don't get that at this level, and having him go into his defensive state and basically leaving the fight to the rest of your team isn't really something you would want. So looking at this, I have to say Mockman isn't really the best hero to be your first Transcendence hero. He at the same time isn't the worst. He does his damage, he deals a lot of damage, he has a lot of potential, and he will clear a lot of things for you. But there are other heroes that are just better. Farikun as a good first Transcendence hero. She will do a lot for you. SFX is still a great first Transcendence hero. She will excel in Vortex, she will excel in Realm's Gate, she's super tanky, she dodges. Super great. Sun Devourer Eos is a great first Transcendence hero. And I would recommend those three over Mockman as first Transcendence hero. Still, we will later see another video I will make on his endgame PvE performance, like with an Amy on his copy and everything. And he can do great stuff there. It's just a question of investment, and at this point, at this early game state, I don't see how you would do the investment into Mockman to make him really great. So with that, guys, I want to end the video. Wish you a great week, and we will see us hopefully in part 3 of this series.